Ladies and gentlemen, there is a silent battleground no one else can see. No headlines announce it. No blood stains the ground. Yet victories and defeats are decided there every single day. That battlefield is your mind, and hear this clearly. Your life will never rise above the level of the thoughts you allow to live rent-free inside you. Your mind is powerful. It can build you up or break you down, can interpret delay as defeat or as preparation. It can turn pressure into panic or into purpose. The same situation, the same storm, the same betrayal, yet two people walk away with two completely different outcomes. The difference was not the storm. The difference was the mind. If you do not take authority over your thoughts will take authority over you. They will wake you up worried, put you to bed afraid, paralyze you right at the moment when movement is required. An unmanaged mind magnifies fear, rewrites history, and forecasts failure before you even try. A disciplined mind speaks back to fear and says, "You will not define my future." Some of the greatest prisons on earth have no bars. They are built out of memories you keep replaying, mistakes you refuse to release, voices you still obey long after they stopped earning the right to speak. You cannot step into a new season with an old mindset. You cannot reach for destiny while dragging yesterday's trauma into today's decisions. Mastering your mind does not mean you never feel pain. It means pain no longer makes decisions for you. It means emotions visit. They do not get keys to the house. You observe negative thoughts, but you do not entertain them. You stop reacting and start responding with wisdom. Your mind must be trained before it can be trusted. Just like a muscle, it grows through resistance. That resistance shows up as discipline when you don't feel like it, faith when evidence is missing, and focus when distractions are loud. Every time you choose purpose over an impulse, you tighten your grip on your destiny. The enemy is not always other people. Sometimes the enemy is the version of you that doubts, delays, and dreams small. Sometimes it's the inner voice that says, "It won't work this time," or "You're not enough." That voice is not truth, it is fear wearing familiarity. When you master your mind enough, you stop being controlled by moods, opinions, and past failures. You begin to walk with clarity, you speak with intention, you move with authority. And suddenly, doors begin to open, not because the world changed, but because you did. So guard your thoughts, train your focus, speak life over yourself. Because if you don't master your mind, it will master you. And it is a terrible master. But when you take control, your mind becomes your greatest servant, carrying you boldly into the future you were created to walk in. The greatest battles of life are not fought on crowded streets, corporate boardrooms, visible stages where applause and criticism echo loudly. They are fought in silence, behind closed eyes and guarded smiles. Most decisive conflicts you will ever face take place within the unseen corridors of your mind. Long before a word is spoken or an action is taken, conversation has already happened inside you. That internal dialogue determines whether you advance with courage or retreat in fear, whether you rise with faith or collapse under doubt. Every external struggle begins as an internal one. Before you ever lose a battle in life, you lose it in thought. Before you step back from opportunity, your mind has already rehearsed failure. Before you quit on your dream, your thoughts have convinced you that the struggle is not worth the reward. The mind is the first place where defeat or victory is declared, and the body simply follows the orders it receives. The danger is that many people underestimate the power of their thoughts. They treat the mind like a suggestion box instead of a command center. Thoughts are allowed to wander freely, shaped by fear, past pain, the opinions of others. Over time, these thoughts consolidate into beliefs, and beliefs solidify into behavior. By the time the consequences appear in real life, people wonder how they got there, not realizing the battle was already lost long ago in the privacy of their own thinking. The mind has a remarkable ability to magnify whatever it focuses on. Fear grows when fed attention. Regret deepens when replayed repeatedly. Worry becomes overwhelming when rehearsed daily. A single negative thought, if left unchecked, can multiply until it dominates your emotional state, distorts your perception, and paralyzes your movement. What began as a fleeting idea becomes a controlling narrative, not because it was true, but because it was allowed to stay. Greatest enemy in these battles is not always outside opposition, it is internal sabotage. The mind can become skilled at convincing you to settle, to wait too long, or to play small under the disguise of being cautious. It whispers that now is not the right time, that you are not ready, that someone else is more qualified. These thoughts sound logical, even responsible, yet they slowly chip away at confidence and courage. Without realizing it, you begin to live beneath your potential, not because you are incapable, but because your mind has negotiated your destiny down. Memory is another battlefield. Painful experiences, failures, betrayals, and disappointments do not automatically leave when circumstances change. They linger in the mind, replaying scenes that reopen wounds. The mind, left unchecked, will drag yesterday's pain into today's decisions, causing you to react in fear rather than respond with wisdom. You may walk into a new opportunity carrying the emotional weight of an old failure, already expecting loss before any effort has begun. Yet the mind is not only a source of conflict, it is also a powerful instrument of transformation. The same mind that can imprison you can liberate you when properly disciplined. Mastery of the mind does not mean the absence of negative thoughts. It means refusing to give them authority. It is learning to observe thoughts without surrendering to them. It is understanding that not every thought deserves agreement, and not every feeling deserves action. Life will always present pressure, uncertainty, and opposition. The difference between those who move forward and those who remain stuck lies not in the absence of struggle, in the ability to govern the inner world. A disciplined mind interprets challenges as training rather than punishment. It recognizes delay as preparation, denial. It understands that discomfort often signals growth, not failure. The mind must be trained deliberately. Just as the body grows stronger through resistance, the mind grows steadier through discipline. This discipline shows itself in moments when giving up feels easier, yet you choose to persist. It appears when negative thoughts arise. Instead of entertaining them, you challenge them with truth. Through repetition, the mind learns a new pattern, one of resilience, focus, and strength. There is also a critical battle between emotion and intention. Emotions are powerful messengers, but poor leaders. When emotions control the mind, life becomes reactive rather than intentional. Decisions are made based on temporary feelings rather than lasting purpose. Trained mind allows emotions to be felt without being obeyed. It acknowledges pain without letting pain dictate direction. The mind also shapes identity. You consistently think about yourself eventually becomes the lens through which you experience the world. If the mind repeats narratives of inadequacy, life will feel limiting even when opportunities abound. If the mind is renewed with purpose and belief, doors that once seemed invisible suddenly appear. Circumstances may remain the same, but perception changes everything. One of the most powerful shifts occurs when the mind moves from survival to vision. Survival thinking focuses on avoiding pain, staying safe, and maintaining comfort. Vision thinking dares to imagine, to risk, and to grow. Battle between these two mindsets determines whether life becomes a cycle of endurance or a journey of fulfillment. The mind must be taught to choose growth over comfort, purpose over ease. Silence often intensifies these internal battles. In quiet moments, unaddressed thoughts surface, demanding attention. This is why many avoid stillness. But silence is not the enemy, avoidance is. In silence, the mind reveals what has been hidden, offering an opportunity for healing and reordering. Facing these thoughts with honesty allows transformation to begin. Ultimately, the greatest battles of life are fought in the mind because the mind determines what you believe, how you interpret reality, how you respond to challenges. Victory begins not when circumstances improve, but when thought patterns shift. When the mind is governed by truth, intention, discipline, external battles lose their power to intimidate. You may not be able to control every event, every person, or every outcome. You can control how your mind interprets and responds to them. That control is not weakness, it is strength. It is the quiet authority that allows you to stand firm when pressure rises, to move forward when doubt whispers, and to believe again after disappointment. The fight within is unavoidable, but it is also winnable. When you choose to confront, train, and master your mind, you reclaim your ability to live with purpose, courage, and clarity. And in doing so, you discover a powerful truth. Once the battle is won in the mind, the rest of life begins to align. Unchecked thoughts are among the most subtle yet destructive forces shaping human destiny. They operate quietly, often unnoticed, weaving themselves into daily decisions, emotions, and reactions. Most people do not sabotage their future through a single dramatic choice. They lose ground gradually, thought by thought, belief by belief. Long before destiny is delayed externally, it is negotiated internally through unchecked thinking. Every destiny begins as a possibility. Possibility requires agreement in the mind before it manifests in life. When thoughts are left unmanaged, they quickly become the architects of limitation. One fearful idea, allowed to repeat itself, begins to feel like wisdom. One memory of failure, replayed repeatedly, evolves into a belief of inadequacy. Over time, the mind builds mental fences that restrict movement, convincing the individual that certain paths are not meant for them. Destiny is not stolen overnight, it is slowly surrendered through internal compromise. Unchecked thoughts distort perception. They exaggerate obstacles and minimize potential. A challenge is perceived as proof of inability rather than an invitation to grow. Delay is interpreted as denial. Correction feels like rejection. The mind starts viewing life through a lens clouded by fear, insecurity, and past disappointment. Once felt achievable now feels risky and eventually impossible. The circumstances may not have changed. Inner interpretation has, and interpretation drives action. Fear thrives in an undisciplined mind. It speaks in reasonable tones, disguising itself as caution and realism. It whispers that now is not the right time, that the risk is too high, that waiting is safer than moving. Without realizing it, people accept fear-based thinking as common sense. Years pass, opportunities close, regret replaces risk, all because fear was allowed to manage the thought process unchecked. Negative self-talk is another powerful saboteur of destiny. Thoughts like, I'm not enough, I always fail, or I don't deserve better, may begin as emotional reactions. Repetition transforms them into identity statements. The mind believes what it hears repeatedly, especially when the voice sounds familiar. Once identity is corrupted, behavior follows. People stop aiming high not because they lack ability, because their inner narrative no longer supports excellence. Unchecked thoughts also trap people in cycles of the past. Memories are revisited not for healing, but for reliving pain. Past mistakes are used as evidence against future success. Instead of learning from experiences, the mind uses them as anchors, keeping progress stalled. Every new opportunity is filtered through yesterday's disappointment, creating hesitation where hope should exist. Destiny cannot unfold while the mind is still negotiating with what has already ended. The danger is amplified by emotional thinking. Emotions are natural, but when thoughts are guided by emotion rather than truth, decisions become unstable. In moments of frustration, the mind may declare quitting as clarity. In moments of exhaustion, it may label rest as surrender. Without mental discipline, temporary feelings start dictating permanent decisions. Lives are rerouted not by intention, but by impulse. Unchecked thoughts influence relationships as well. Assumptions replace communication. Insecurity breeds suspicion. A single thought of rejection left unchallenged can create distance where none was intended. Relationships fracture not always because of actions, but because of internal narratives that were never questioned. Destiny, which often unfolds through connection and support, is hindered when the mind isolates itself behind unfounded conclusions. There is also the silent erosion of confidence caused by comparison. The unchecked mind constantly measures progress against others, magnifying personal shortcomings and dismissing individual growth. Instead of focusing on purpose, the mind becomes distracted by competition. This comparison steals joy, urgency, and motivation, replacing them with envy and discouragement. Destiny thrives on uniqueness. Unchecked thoughts pressure the individual to conform or withdraw. The most tragic impact of unchecked thinking is delay. Destiny rarely demands immediate perfection. It requires movement. Yet an undisciplined mind insists on waiting until conditions feel ideal. Confidence feels complete and fear vanishes entirely. That moment rarely comes. While waiting for certainty, life continues moving forward. Doors silently close, seasons shift, and the window of opportunity narrows. What could have been developed through experience is postponed indefinitely. Yet unchecked thoughts do not mean irreversible damage. Awareness marks the turning point. The moment an individual recognizes that thoughts are influencing outcomes, responsibility replaces helplessness. Destiny regains momentum not when life becomes easier, but when thought patterns are challenged intentionally. This requires courage, the courage to question familiar narratives, to replace fear with truth, and to choose belief even before evidence appears. Discipline in thinking does not eliminate struggle, it redefines struggle as part of growth. The mind learns to pause before accepting every thought as fact. Negative ideas are confronted, not entertained. The question shifts from, what if I fail, to what if this is how I grow? This mental shift does not change circumstances instantly, but it changes direction, and direction determines destination. Unchecked thoughts sabotage destiny by shaping identity, influencing decisions, and limiting action. But a renewed, disciplined mind restores alignment with purpose. When thoughts are guided intentionally, fear loses authority, confidence rebuilds, and action resumes. Destiny begins to unfold not because obstacles disappear, but because the mind no longer yields to sabotage. In the end, destiny follows the path cleared by thought. What the mind permits, life produces. When thoughts are left unchecked, destiny shrinks to the size of fear. When thoughts are governed by clarity and purpose, destiny expands to meet its full potential. The future is not decided by circumstance alone, by which thoughts are allowed to lead the way. The same situation can place two people at the exact crossroads of life, lead them to entirely different destinations. The environment is identical, the pressure is equal. The resources may even be the same. Still, person emerges stronger, wiser, and more determined, while the other walks away discouraged, defeated, and convinced that life is unfair. The difference is rarely the situation itself. The difference is mindset. Mindset is the internal lens through which reality is interpreted. It determines whether circumstances are received as obstacles or opportunities, punishments or preparation. Situation alone does not assign meaning. The mind does. That meaning then dictates emotional response, decision-making, and behavior. In this way, mindset quietly yet powerfully orchestrates outcomes long before they are visible to others. When a difficult situation arises, the mind immediately begins narrating what it believes is happening. This narrative forms almost instantly, often influenced by past experiences, unresolved pain, and learned beliefs. If the mindset is rooted in fear, the situation becomes threatening. If the mindset is grounded in growth, the same situation becomes instructional. Nothing about the event has changed, but everything about its effect has. Pressure is one of the clearest examples of this principle. For one person, pressure produces panic. It overwhelms the senses, clouds judgment, invites impulsive reactions. For another, pressure sharpens focus. It clarifies priorities and reveals inner strength. Both experience pressure. Mindset decided whether pressure be crushing weight or a refining force. Failure follows the same pattern. One mindset treats failure as a final verdict, a confirmation of inadequacy. This response triggers shame, avoidance, and retreat. Another mindset interprets failure as feedback. It extracts lessons, rebuilds strategy, and tries again with improved insight. The failure itself was neutral. Mindset gave it meaning. Over time, these interpretations compound, leading one person to stagnation and another to mastery. Delay is another situation often misunderstood. The same delay can convince one individual that their efforts are wasted and their time has run out. Discouragement sets in, motivation fades, and passion dims. Yet someone else in the same delay sees an incubation period, a time for strengthening, sharpening skills, and preparing inwardly for what is coming. Delay becomes preparation instead of denial. Again, the situation did not change. The mindset transformed its impact. Mindset also plays a critical role in how rejection is processed. Rejection can convince one person that they are unwanted, unqualified, or inferior. That belief begins to influence how they show up in future opportunities with hesitation and self-doubt. Another person interprets rejection as redirection. Instead of internalizing it as a personal failure, They see it as alignment towards something better suited. One mindset shrinks possibilities, the other expands them. The power of mindset becomes even more evident during uncertainty. Uncertainty unsettles many because the mind seeks predictability for a sense of safety. For a fear-based mindset, uncertainty magnifies anxiety and creates paralysis. Decisions are postponed, movement stalls, and overthinking dominates. For a faith-driven or growth-oriented mindset, uncertainty becomes a space of possibility. It invites creativity, adaptability, and exploration. While one mind freezes, the other adjusts and advances. Mindset governs emotional responses as well. Two people can receive the same criticism. One absorbs it as an attack, responding defensively or withdrawing entirely. Their confidence erodes and resentment builds. The other receives the same words with discernment, separating insult from insight. They extract what is useful and discard what is not. The external input was identical. The internal processing determined whether it became damage or development. Even success is shaped by mindset. Some people view success with suspicion, fearing loss or exposure, which leads to self-sabotage. Others see success as responsibility and expansion, motivating greater discipline and focus. The same achievement can either become a peak followed by decline or a platform for sustained growth, depending solely on perspective. Mindset does not form overnight. It is the accumulation of thoughts practiced repeatedly over time. Beliefs reinforced by repetition become automatic responses. This is why people often react without consciously choosing how to respond. The mind defaults to what it has been trained to believe. Without intentional effort, it simply replays familiar patterns rooted in past experiences. However, mindset is not fixed. While many believe they are defined by their circumstances or upbringing, the truth is that mindset can be reshaped. Awareness begins the process. When an individual recognizes that their interpretation, not the situation, is shaping outcomes, control returns to their hands. Responsibility replaces victimhood and empowerment replaces helplessness. A renewed mindset begins to ask different questions. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" it asks, "What can this develop in me?" Instead of focusing on loss, it searches for lessons. Instead of assuming the worst, it explores potential. These questions redirect energy from despair to purpose, from reaction to response. Over time, compound effect of mindset becomes undeniable. Consistent perspectives produce consistent results. Those who repeatedly interpret challenges as opportunities develop resilience. Those who consistently interpret challenges as threats develop fear. One mindset fosters growth, endurance, and confidence. The other leads to avoidance, stagnation, and regret. The same situation does not determine destiny. It merely presents raw material. Mindset decides how that material is used, whether it becomes a foundation for building or a weight that drags progress down. Two people may stand in the same storm, but one looks for shelter while the other learns how to navigate the wind. The storm was the same. The outcome was not. In the end, life will continue to present identical situations to countless individuals. Opportunities, challenges, failures, delays, uncertainties are universal. What is not universal is how they are perceived and processed. Mindset remains the quiet force dividing those who grow from those who withdraw, those who adapt from those who resist, those who move forward from those who remain stuck. When mindset changes, outcomes follow. Not because circumstances suddenly improve, because interpretation does. And interpretation, practiced consistently, shapes action, perseverance, and belief. That is why the same situation produces different outcomes, because mindset determines whether life's moments become limitations or stepping stones. Pain is real. It is undeniable, unavoidable, and deeply human. Everyone encounters it in different forms. Loss, rejection, betrayal, failure, disappointment, even unmet expectations. Pain does not ask for permission before entering your life, and it does not discriminate based on faith, effort, or intention. It arrives suddenly or lingers quietly, leaving marks that may not be visible to others. To deny pain is not strength, it is avoidance. Pain is real. But while pain is real, it should never be allowed to lead your decisions. The danger of pain is not in feeling it, but in following it. Pain is a powerful signal, yet a poor guide. It speaks loudly, urgently, and emotionally. When pain leads, decisions become reactive rather than intentional. Choices are made to escape discomfort instead of to pursue purpose. In those moments, relief replaces wisdom. Short-term comfort outweighs long-term consequence. Lives are altered not because pain existed, because pain was placed in a position of authority it was never meant to hold. Pain has a way of narrowing perspective. When you are hurting, the world feels smaller, darker, and more hostile. Options that once seemed possible now look unreachable. The mind, influenced by pain, begins to think in extremes. It tells you that because something hurt once, it will always hurt. Because someone failed you, everyone will. Because you fell short, you are incapable of success. Pain exaggerates its narrative, convincing you that the present moment defines the rest of your life. Decisions made from pain often prioritize avoidance. You avoid vulnerability because you were hurt before. You avoid opportunity because you failed once. You avoid commitment because you were abandoned. In protecting yourself from pain, you unknowingly restrict growth. The walls built for safety slowly become prisons. What begins as self-preservation can quietly turn into self-sabotage when pain dictates behavior. Pain also distorts memory. It highlights negative moments while minimizing progress and resilience. Past wounds resurface, replayed repeatedly in the mind, influencing present choices. Instead of responding to what is happening now, you react to what happened then. New seasons are judged through old scars. Decisions are made not based on clarity, but on unresolved hurt. One of the most common mistakes people make is confusing emotional intensity with truth. Pain feels convincing, it feels justified, it demands immediate action. But feelings, no matter how strong, are not always factual. Pain tells you to quit when perseverance is required. It tells you to speak harshly when silence would preserve peace. It tells you to isolate when connection is what will heal you. If pain becomes your leader, it will steer you away from the very things that could restore you. This does not mean pain should be ignored or suppressed. Ignored pain leaks into behavior in destructive ways. Suppressed pain turns into bitterness, anger, or resentment. Acknowledging pain is necessary for healing. But acknowledgement is not the same as obedience. Pain should be observed, processed, understood, but never placed in control. There is wisdom in creating space between emotion and decision. Growth begins when you learn to pause. Pain rises. Instead of reacting, you stop, you breathe. You allow the emotion to exist without allowing it to dictate direction. In that pause, clarity begins to return. You begin to ask better questions. Is this decision aligned with who I want to become? Will this choice heal me or just help me escape? Am I responding to the present or reacting to the past? These questions weaken pain's grip on your judgment. Pain often demands immediate resolution, but healing requires patience. Decisions made too quickly, while emotions are raw, often lead to regret. Time creates emotional distance, and distance restores perspective. What felt urgent yesterday may feel unnecessary tomorrow. Felt unbearable may feel manageable with clarity and support. Allowing time before deciding is not weakness, it is wisdom. Pain can also become a teacher when it is no longer a ruler. Pain reveals what matters, where boundaries are needed, and what needs healing. It produces depth, empathy, and strength when processed correctly. But when pain rules, it turns lessons into limitations. Instead of teaching resilience, it fosters fear. Instead of encouraging wisdom, it cultivates distrust. The outcome depends on who is in charge, you or the pain. Many people look back on moments of regret and realize the same pattern. The decision was made when emotions were at their peak. Words were spoken that could not be taken back. Relationships were abandoned too quickly. Opportunities were rejected out of fear. Paths were changed not because they were wrong, but because pain made staying feel unbearable. Pain did not protect them, it redirected them away from growth. There is also a connection between pain-led decisions and identity. When pain leads too long, it begins to shape how you see yourself. You stop identifying as capable and start identifying as wounded. You define yourself by what hurt you rather than by what strengthens you. Decisions then follow that identity, smaller, safer, more defensive. Destiny shrinks, not because potential disappears, but because pain rewrites self-perception. Breaking this cycle requires courage. It requires choosing principle over impulse and purpose over relief. It means accepting that pain is part of the process, a signal to retreat from it. Some of the most meaningful growth in life occurs while pain is present, not after it disappears. Waiting for pain to leave before moving forward often means waiting indefinitely. When pain no longer leads, intention returns. You begin to act based on values rather than wounds. You forgive not because it feels good, but because it frees you. You continue not because it is easy, because it is necessary. You choose wisely even while hurting, and that choice becomes the foundation of healing rather than the product of it. Pain is real. It is temporary. Decisions, however, have lasting consequences. Allowing a temporary emotion to shape permanent outcomes is one of the greatest mistakes a person can make. When you acknowledge pain without surrendering leadership to it, you reclaim your power. You feel deeply, yet choose wisely. You hurt, yet move forward with clarity. In the end, pain should inform growth, not dictate direction. It should be processed, not obeyed, felt, not followed. Pain is no longer the voice making decisions. Healing accelerates, wisdom deepens, and life begins to align again. Pain may walk with you for a season, but it should never be the one holding the map. Old mindsets cannot sustain new seasons. This truth is as unyielding as the cycles of nature. Life moves forward. Circumstances change, opportunities emerge, and challenges evolve. What once served you, what once kept you safe or helped you survive, may no longer be enough to carry you through what is coming. Holding on to yesterday's thinking, yesterday's strategies, and yesterday's assumptions is a recipe for stagnation. If you enter a new season with an old mindset, the season will overwhelm you, the opportunities will pass you by, and the growth you were meant to experience will slip away. A season is not simply a stretch of time. It is a transformation of conditions. It can be an internal shift, an external circumstance, or both. The mind must adjust to match the season, otherwise it becomes a limiting factor. Old mindsets are like outdated tools. They may have worked in the past. They are not designed for the tasks of the present. They approach new challenges with the logic of yesterday, blind to the nuances and demands of today. This misalignment causes frustration, failure, and delay. Old mindsets are rooted in habit, familiarity, and sometimes fear. They were shaped by past experiences, successes, and failures. While these patterns may have provided comfort and predictability, they also create resistance to change. Person who relies on old thinking approaches new opportunities with old expectations. When the results differ, the mind reacts with confusion, doubt, even rejection. Instead of embracing the new season, it clings to the familiar, seeking refuge in what is known rather than what is possible. One of the most common ways old mindsets hinder growth is by underestimating the demands of the new season. New seasons often require adaptability, boldness, and creativity. Old thinking, however, assumes that success comes from repetition rather than reinvention. It tells you to continue with the strategies that worked before, ignoring that yesterday's victories do not guarantee tomorrow's success. Result is stagnation, a mismatch between opportunity and approach, between challenge and preparation. Old mindsets also limit perception. When the mind operates from outdated assumptions, it fails to recognize the possibilities before it. The person with old thinking sees obstacles instead of openings, scarcity instead of abundance, limitations instead of potential. The season may be ripe with promise, but the mind cannot see beyond its inherited patterns. Opportunities arrive, but the individual is unable to grasp them because the vision has not expanded to meet the season's demands. Fear is often at the heart of holding on to old mindsets. Change is uncomfortable, and the unknown triggers anxiety. Old thinking offers security. It is familiar, predictable, and safe. Letting go of it feels risky, but risk is inherent in every new season. The mind that refuses to evolve is like a seed that refuses to break the shell. It will never reach its full potential. The soil may be fertile, sun may shine, the rain may fall, but without growth, the seed remains trapped, limited by the shell it refuses to leave behind. Old mindsets also sabotage relationships, work, and opportunities. A person who thinks the same way as they did 5 years ago may struggle to relate to new people, new ideas, and new systems. In a world that constantly evolves, a static mindset is an anchor. Colleagues, mentors, or collaborators may advance, innovate, and adapt, leaving behind anyone who refuses to expand their thinking. Growth in one area becomes meaningless if the mind cannot keep pace with the demands of the season. One of the most subtle dangers of old thinking is the illusion of competence. People often mistake experience for wisdom. Just because you have been through similar situations does not mean you are equipped for what is coming. Old solutions applied to new problems often fail because the variables have changed. The season may require new strategies, fresh perspective, and renewed focus. Clinging to old approaches may provide temporary comfort, but it will not deliver lasting success. Old mindsets also prevent learning. Learning requires humility, the acknowledgement that what you know is not sufficient for what you face. When the mind refuses to adapt, stops absorbing new information, insights, and methods, it rejects innovation and creativity because these require stepping outside the comfort zone. A stagnant mind is blind to growth. It interprets advice, feedback, or correction as criticism rather than opportunity. In this way, thinking becomes self-limiting. Faith and belief are directly affected by mindset. Entering a new season with old thinking often leads to doubt and hesitation. The mind questions the unknown, fears the outcome, and clings to familiar patterns. Faith, the kind that moves mountains, achieves dreams, and transforms lives, requires expansion of thought. Faith requires a mindset willing to leave certainty behind and trust that new possibilities exist. Old mindsets often cannot sustain this type of faith. So the season passes without fulfillment. The key to sustaining new seasons is mental renewal. The mind must be willing to evolve, to shed patterns that no longer serve, and to embrace growth, learning, and adaptability. Mental renewal does not happen automatically. It requires conscious effort. It requires reflection, openness to new perspectives, courage to challenge long-held beliefs. It requires the willingness to unlearn what is comfortable in order to learn what is necessary. A renewed mind can meet the demands of a new season and thrive in it. Adaptability is essential. A new season may require more patience, greater discipline, or bolder action than the old season demanded. Old mindsets resist this, often resulting in frustration and burnout. They are like tools that break under pressure because they were not designed for the task at hand. The person who embraces change, who thinks differently, who learns continually will find that the same season that overwhelms others becomes a catalyst for growth. Old mindsets are also tied to old identities. People often cling to the version of themselves that existed in the past. They define themselves by previous roles, experiences, or limitations. But a new season requires a new self, a version that can rise to meet new challenges, seize new opportunities, and embrace new visions. Holding on to an old identity while stepping into a new season is like trying to wear yesterday's clothes into tomorrow. They do not fit. They restrict movement. Transformation is the natural law of life. Seasons change whether we are ready or not. Nature demonstrates it daily. Trees shed leaves, rivers shift courses, the sun rises and sets in cycles that do not pause for comfort. Human life is no different. Opportunities, challenges, growth cannot be postponed indefinitely. If the mind resists change, it will suffer under the weight of circumstances. But if the mind adapts, old thinking is replaced with new understanding. The season becomes a time of expansion, discovery, and fulfillment. The message is clear. Old mindsets cannot sustain new seasons. Holding on to outdated beliefs, habits, or strategies will not protect you. It will limit you. The only way to thrive is to cultivate mental flexibility, to embrace learning, and to renew your thinking continually. The mind must grow faster than circumstances change, otherwise the season will pass you by. The growth, opportunities, breakthroughs that could have been yours remain inaccessible because the mind refused to evolve. In conclusion, life is a series of seasons, each with unique demands, lessons, and opportunities. What worked yesterday will not necessarily work today. To navigate these seasons successfully, the mind must be intentional, adaptable, and renewed. Old thinking will weigh you down, new thinking will lift you. Old mindsets may have protected you in the past, but only a renewed mind can sustain you in the present and carry you into the future. To step fully into what is coming, the mind must let go of yesterday and rise to meet tomorrow. Growth waits for no one. The prepared mind can thrive in every season. Discipline is one of the most powerful forces in human life, yet it is often misunderstood. Many people associate discipline with restriction, rigidity, or punishment, but in reality, discipline is the framework that allows potential to become achievement. It is the unseen force that turns intention into action, dreams into reality, chaos into clarity. Above all, discipline trains the mind to obey purpose, not emotion, a distinction that can determine the trajectory of a life. Human experiences emotion. Joy, anger, fear, frustration, excitement, and doubt are all part of the human condition. These emotions arise naturally, often spontaneously, and sometimes intensely. They can provide insight, motivation, and guidance, but they are not reliable leaders. Emotions are fleeting. They are reactive. They respond to circumstances rather than shape them intentionally. To allow emotion to govern decision-making is to surrender control to forces outside your conscious authority. You become reactive rather than proactive, responding to circumstances instead of shaping them. Purpose, on the other hand, is enduring. Purpose is the internal compass that directs life with clarity, focus, and consistency. It is grounded in vision, values, and principles, not temporary feelings. Purpose is the reason you continue when the world pushes back, is what motivates you to act even when fear whispers, doubt lingers, or fatigue threatens to overwhelm. Purpose is not emotional, it is intentional. Discipline is the bridge that connects the mind to this higher authority, ensuring that actions align with long-term goals rather than short-term impulses. Discipline trains the mind to recognize the difference between emotion and purpose. When emotions rise, anger, fear, sadness, even excitement, the disciplined mind does not immediately react. It pauses, it evaluates, it asks, does this feeling serve my greater goal? Or is it a distraction from it? Without discipline, the mind reacts instinctively. Words are spoken in anger, decisions are made in fear, and regrets follow. Discipline creates the space between emotion and action, allowing the individual to choose a response guided by purpose rather than impulse. Consider how emotion can mislead. Fear convinces you to quit just before breakthrough. Impatience pushes you to abandon the process before results manifest. Frustration causes you to lash out or retreat when patience and perseverance are required. Excitement may encourage reckless decisions, staking intensity for insight. Emotions are vivid and convincing, but they are temporary and inconsistent. Purpose, reinforced by discipline, provides stability and clarity in the midst of emotional turbulence. Discipline is cultivated through practice. It is not innate, and it does not develop overnight. Every time a person chooses action aligned with purpose instead of reaction to emotion, discipline strengthens. Every time a thought of doubt is met with a choice to persevere, every time distraction is ignored in favor of focus, the mind grows more attuned to purpose. A muscle, the mind becomes stronger, more reliable, and more capable of sustaining long-term vision. Without repeated exercise, defaults to emotional reaction and consistency becomes impossible. Training the mind to obey purpose also requires self-awareness. Discipline cannot exist without reflection. You must recognize the emotional triggers that influence your thinking. You must identify the patterns that lead to reactive behavior. Awareness allows the mind to anticipate and prepare for moments when emotion will rise. Without self-awareness, discipline is blind. It exists in theory but fails in practice. Self-awareness combined with repeated choice builds the capacity for purposeful living even under pressure. The benefits of a disciplined mind are profound. When the mind obeys purpose rather than emotion, actions become deliberate rather than impulsive. Decisions are consistent rather than chaotic. Effort is sustained rather than scattered. Life no longer feels like a series of random reactions, but like a directed journey. The mind learns to prioritize long-term goals over temporary satisfaction, resulting in growth, achievement, fulfillment that would be impossible without intentional control. Discipline also protects against regret. Most regrets in life stem from decisions made in the heat of emotion rather than the clarity of purpose. Words spoken in anger, choices made in fear, opportunities passed in doubt. All of these could have been avoided if discipline had guided the mind. The disciplined mind learns to pause, evaluate, and choose actions that honor long-term vision rather than immediate feeling. Over time, this builds not only success, but also integrity and credibility. Emotion is powerful, and it can be used to fuel action, but it must be harnessed by discipline. Passion without direction often leads to burnout or failure. Frustration without control breeds conflict. Excitement without focus creates recklessness. Discipline channels emotion, transforming energy into consistent, productive action. It turns feelings from unpredictable forces into fuel that propels purpose forward rather than derailing it. Furthermore, discipline strengthens resilience. Life is full of obstacles, setbacks, and uncertainty. Emotions will fluctuate constantly. Joy will fade. Disappointment will arrive. Fear will rise. But a disciplined mind anchored in purpose maintains direction despite turbulence. When the body is tired, the mind remains committed. When circumstances are unfavorable, the mind persists. Discipline teaches the mind that endurance is not dependent on feeling good, but on doing what is necessary to fulfill purpose. Discipline also creates freedom. Paradoxically, obedience to purpose liberates more than surrender to emotion. When the mind is ruled by emotion, every circumstance threatens to destabilize the individual. Decisions feel heavy, consequences unpredictable, and control elusive. When the mind is disciplined, guided by purpose, freedom emerges. Freedom comes from mastery over impulses, from the ability to choose actions that serve long-term goals, and from the security of knowing that direction and integrity are maintained regardless of emotional fluctuation. Building discipline requires establishing habits, are the structures that support the mind in obeying purpose automatically, even when emotion is strong. Daily practices, routines, consistent behaviors train the mind to default to purpose rather than reaction. Repetition reinforces neural pathways, creating automatic alignment with intention. Over time, the mind becomes conditioned to prioritize long-term objectives over short-term satisfaction. Discipline also involves accountability. The mind obeys purpose more effectively when there are reminders, checks, or structures that reinforce commitment. This may be through mentors, peer support, journaling, or self-assessment. Without accountability, the mind may drift, responding to emotion rather than intention. Discipline thrives in structure and support, converting awareness and intention into habitual action. In conclusion, discipline is the bridge between potential and achievement. It trains the mind to obey purpose rather than emotion, ensuring that decisions are deliberate, actions are consistent, and life aligns with vision. Emotions are temporary, unpredictable, and often misleading. Purpose is enduring, guiding, and reliable. Discipline allows the mind to filter emotional impulses, respond intentionally, and act in alignment with long-term goals. Without discipline, emotions govern, and life becomes reactive, inconsistent, and limited. With discipline, purpose reigns and the mind becomes a powerful instrument capable of overcoming obstacles, sustaining growth, and achieving greatness. Mastery of the mind through discipline is not merely a skill, it is the foundation upon which extraordinary lives are built. Fear often speaks in a familiar voice. It does not always roar in obvious threats or announce its presence with alarms. More often, fear sneaks in quietly, disguised in tones that sound reasonable, comfortable, and even familiar. It speaks in the same voice that once cautioned you, guided you, or protected you. It may even sound like your own internal dialogue, echoing the thoughts you have repeated to yourself over years of experience. And because of this familiarity, fear is one of the most insidious forces in life. It masquerades as wisdom, counsel, or prudence, convincing you to retreat when you are meant to advance. Fear is not inherently wrong. It is a natural emotional response designed to protect. It alerts you to danger, nudges you to caution, prevents impulsive decisions in the face of real threat. But when fear continues to speak beyond its purpose, when it dictates decisions long after danger has passed, it becomes a master instead of a messenger. And when it speaks in a voice you recognize and trust, you are more likely to obey it without questioning whether it serves your growth or purpose. Think about the ways fear disguises itself. Sometimes it sounds like doubt. Are you sure you're ready for this? Other times it whispers hesitation. maybe this isn't the right time. It often speaks as self-protection. You don't want to risk getting hurt again. It can sound like logic. It's not practical to try now, because these words feel familiar, because they echo experiences you have had before. Mind accepts them without challenge, and in that acceptance, fear gains control. The familiarity of fear comes from repetition. Over the years, fear has been reinforced by experiences, warnings, societal conditioning, and past failures. Each time you obeyed fear, the voice became stronger, more convincing, more ingrained in your mental landscape. It learns your habits, understands your vulnerabilities, and adapts its approach to keep you within perceived safety zones. This is why fear can feel almost comforting. At times, it becomes predictable, a familiar guide, even though its guidance may be limiting or destructive. Fear often manipulates memories to strengthen its voice. It recalls previous mistakes, failures, or humiliations, reminding you of the pain you felt. It speaks through the lens of past experiences, exaggerating risks and minimizing possibilities. It convinces you that because something hurt before, it will hurt again. It tells you that history is destined to repeat itself, so you should avoid moving forward. Fear wraps past pain in familiar words, making it sound like wisdom while secretly keeping you from your destiny. Another way fear speaks in a familiar voice is by echoing the voices of others, the very people you have listened to in the past. Critics, naysayers, and skeptics often become the soundtrack for fear. Their warnings, doubt, and disbelief are internalized and repeated by the mind, even long after the original voices have faded. When fear speaks, it may sound like your parents, teachers, or peers. That's too risky. You're not ready. Don't aim too high, you'll fail. Because these voices were trusted in the past, fear gains authority when it repeats them, making it harder to distinguish truth from limitation. Fear thrives on familiarity because it builds comfort through resistance. It creates an illusion of safety, convincing you that retreat is protection and hesitation is wisdom. It discourages risk by framing boldness as reckless and opportunity as dangerous. And because it sounds like what you already know, you rarely question it. You may even feel justified for listening, believing that the familiar voice is experience speaking rather than fear holding you back, yet fear can never create growth. It can never produce courage, wisdom, or achievement. It is reactive, not proactive. It is defensive, not generative. Its purpose is to protect the present self from perceived harm. But it cannot lead you into new territory, new opportunities, or new seasons. If you allow fear to continue speaking in a familiar voice, you will repeatedly make decisions that keep you within boundaries rather than propelling you into expansion. You will repeat cycles of hesitation, regret, and limitation because the voice sounds safe, even though its advice is destructive. The key to overcoming fear is discernment. You must learn to recognize its voice even when it feels familiar and evaluate its message against reality and purpose. Ask yourself, is this warning real or imagined? Is this hesitation protecting me or preventing me? Am I listening to fear disguised as wisdom? Am I considering truth guided by clarity? By questioning the familiar voice, you separate fear from principle. You begin to distinguish between instinctive protection and self-imposed limitation. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to act despite fear, especially when fear is familiar and convincing. The voice of fear will always be there, echoing past failures, predicting imagined dangers, and rehearsing old doubts. The difference between those who advance and those who remain stuck is the ability to recognize fear for what it is and choose action aligned with purpose. Courage requires a conscious decision to follow vision rather than retreat at the familiar sound of warning. Another important truth is that familiarity does not equal accuracy. Just because fear sounds like your own thought or the voice of someone you trust does not mean it is true. The familiar voice may be anchored in outdated beliefs, societal limitations, or past experiences that no longer apply. Life changes, circumstances evolve, and opportunities demand new thinking. The voice that served as guidance yesterday may become a trap today. Recognizing this distinction is crucial for personal growth and destiny. To navigate fear effectively, cultivate a mindset of awareness and intentionality. Awareness allows you to identify when fear is speaking, and intentionality allows you to choose whether to obey or override it. Fear rises in a familiar voice. Pause, breathe, and reflect. Consider the potential consequences of both action and inaction. Align your decision with your purpose, not the comfort of familiarity. This practice trains the mind to obey vision rather than retreat at every familiar whisper of doubt. Fear also diminishes over time when confronted consistently. The more you act in alignment with purpose despite the familiar voice of fear, the less convincing that voice becomes. Repetition builds confidence. Success, even small steps of progress, undermines fear's authority. What once sounded like undeniable wisdom begins to sound like the echo of insecurity. Familiarity is no longer a trap, but a reference point, a reminder of the obstacles you overcame, not a barrier that controls you. Finally, remember that the voice of fear is not permanent. It will always try to return, but it cannot dominate a mind trained to discern, courageous, focused on purpose. The familiar voice is not your enemy, it is a signal. It alerts you to vulnerability, challenges, and growth opportunities. You must always lead, not follow. You must always choose purpose over the comfort of obedience to a voice that sounds familiar, yet seeks to confine rather than empower. Fear often speaks in a familiar voice, but familiarity does not make it truth. Its familiarity makes it persuasive, convincing, and dangerous. It masquerades as wisdom, caution, or prudence, yet it limits growth and restrains action. The key to freedom, progress, and fulfillment is to recognize this voice, question its authority, and act in alignment with purpose rather than comfort. Courage, discernment, discipline transform the familiar voice of fear from a controlling force into a signal for growth. And once the mind learns to act in spite of fear, the possibilities for achievement, fulfillment, and transformation are limitless. Mastery of the mind is the cornerstone of a life lived with intention, purpose, and power. The mind is where all battles are won or lost, where all victories are conceived, and where all defeats begin long before they manifest in reality. To master the mind is to gain control over the very instrument that interprets experience, directs action, and shapes perception. It is to govern the internal world so decisively that external circumstances, no matter how challenging, no longer dictate the trajectory of life. Mastery of the mind leads to three critical outcomes: clarity, authority, and confidence. These are not mere traits. They are the pillars of personal power, leadership, and fulfillment. Clarity is the first fruit of a disciplined, mastered mind. A mind in turmoil is a mind clouded by noise, fear, doubt, confusion, distraction, and indecision. In this state, perception is distorted, priorities are blurred, and the ability to make sound choices diminishes. When mind is mastered, however, clarity emerges. Thoughts are organized, emotions are understood and controlled, and focus is directed toward meaningful objectives. Mastery allows the individual to see situations for what they are, not through the distortions of fear, prejudice, or unresolved pain. Clarity is more than just understanding. It is precision in thought and action. It allows a person to distinguish between what is urgent and what is important, between temporary discomfort and permanent consequences, between influence that should be acted upon and noise that should be ignored. With clarity, the mind becomes a lens through which life is viewed without distortion. Decisions are no longer reactive, they are deliberate. Direction is no longer uncertain. It is intentional. Mastery of the mind cuts through confusion, allowing one to act with purpose rather than drift with circumstance. Authority is the second result of mastering the mind. Authority does not come from position, title, or external recognition. True authority begins internally. It is the command a person has over their own thoughts, emotions, and decisions. When the mind is mastered, a person is no longer a slave to external opinion, situational pressure, or emotional impulses. The mastered mind dictates behavior according to principle, purpose, and long-term vision. Authority is demonstrated in the ability to respond rather than react, to lead oneself before attempting to lead others, to make consistent choices even under stress or opposition. Mastery of the mind produces a sovereign individual, Authority in thought translates to authority in life. It allows a person to set boundaries, to demand respect, to navigate relationships and environments with confidence and composure. When the mind is disciplined, one is no longer tossed about by circumstance or dominated by uncertainty. Authority arises naturally from a mind that has been trained to govern itself. In this state, influence over external matters increases because internal control has been established. Leadership begins within the mind before it manifests externally. Confidence is the third outcome, and it is inseparable from clarity and authority. Confidence is not mere bravado or arrogance. It is a deep-seated assurance that comes from alignment between thought, action, and purpose. Mastered mind fosters confidence because it understands itself, knows its principles, and can navigate challenges without being destabilized by fear or doubt. Confidence does not depend on external validation. It comes from knowing that regardless of circumstances, one can respond effectively, make sound decisions, continue forward with purpose. Confidence rooted in mastery is resilient. It does not crumble when criticism arises, setbacks occur, or plans are delayed. Confidence based on performance or recognition, which is fragile and conditional. Confidence born of mental mastery is anchored in self-knowledge and self-command. It allows a person to act boldly in pursuit of goals, take calculated risks, remain composed under pressure. Confidence becomes a stabilizing force, quiet assurance that equips a person to face uncertainty with courage and determination. The process of mastering the mind is neither simple nor instantaneous. It requires deliberate effort, discipline, and consistent practice. It begins with awareness, the ability to observe thoughts without being consumed by them. Awareness allows one to recognize patterns of fear, doubt, or negativity, and to intervene before these patterns dictate behavior. Once awareness is established, mind can be trained through discipline, choosing which thoughts to nurture, which emotions to heed, and which impulses to control. Mastery also requires resilience. The mind will resist change. Old habits, ingrained beliefs, and habitual emotional reactions often push back against conscious effort. The mind that is being trained for clarity, authority, confidence must endure discomfort, confront resistance, and maintain focus even when progress seems slow. Each act of deliberate thought, each decision to prioritize purpose over impulse strengthens neural pathways and reinforces the patterns that support mastery. Over time, mind becomes less reactive, more intentional, and increasingly aligned with long-term goals. The benefits of mastery ripple outward into every aspect of life. Clarity ensures that decisions are informed and directed, minimizing wasted effort and reducing regret. Authority empowers one to navigate relationships, career, opportunities with composure and influence. Confidence allows bold action and sustained perseverance even when external conditions are difficult. Together, clarity, authority, and confidence form a triad that supports personal growth, achievement, and leadership. A mastered mind also transforms adversity into opportunity. Challenges are inevitable, setbacks are guaranteed. The mind that has been disciplined to obey purpose rather than emotion interprets obstacles as learning experiences rather than insurmountable barriers. Clarity allows the individual to understand the situation fully. Authority allows them to control their response, and confidence allows them to act decisively. In this way, adversity becomes a proving ground rather than a prison. Furthermore, mastery of the mind enhances emotional intelligence. Emotions are no longer chaotic forces, but are understood, managed, and directed appropriately. The mind can experience joy, anger, grief, and excitement without being controlled by them. Emotional balance reinforces clarity, strengthens authority, and deepens confidence. The individual becomes capable of navigating complex interpersonal dynamics, leading with empathy and maintaining composure under pressure. Spiritual, personal, professional life all benefit from a mastered mind. In spiritual growth, clarity allows discernment, authority ensures alignment with values, confidence sustains faith and perseverance. In personal life, it produces healthier relationships, stronger boundaries, and self-assurance. In professional life, it enhances decision-making, strategic thinking, and leadership capability. Mastery of the mind is the engine that drives growth across every dimension of life. Finally, mastery of the mind fosters freedom. Mind that is dominated by impulse, fear, or external influence is enslaved to circumstance. Mind that is mastered experiences liberation, the freedom to act in alignment with purpose, the freedom to maintain peace in chaos, freedom to pursue vision without hesitation. Clarity, authority, and confidence are not just outcomes of mastery, they are the hallmarks of a liberated mind that refuses to be controlled by anything outside of deliberate, purposeful thought. In conclusion, mastery of the mind is the foundation of a life of impact and fulfillment. It leads to clarity, allowing precise perception and intentional action. It produces authority, enabling sovereignty over thoughts, decisions, and influence in life. It cultivates confidence, equipping the individual to act boldly, consistently, and resiliently. Mastery is achieved through awareness, discipline, and resilience, and its effects permeate every aspect of existence. To master the mind is to transform potential into power, uncertainty into direction, and possibility into reality. It is the key to living a life that is not reactive, but intentional, not passive, but influential, not uncertain, but bold and confident. Clarity, authority, confidence are not just outcomes. They are the evidence that the mind has been conquered, trained, and aligned with the purpose for which it was created. The mind is controlled, the future becomes accessible. This statement is not merely a motivational phrase. It is a principle rooted in the reality of human life and the nature of thought. The mind is the gateway through which destiny is shaped. Every action, every choice, every decision begins in thought. Uncontrolled thoughts, scattered focus, and reactive patterns cloud vision and obscure opportunity. When the mind is disciplined, governed with intention, and aligned with purpose, the pathway to the future opens with clarity and direction. Control over the mind is not optional for anyone who desires a meaningful, productive, and empowered life. It is essential. The mind is the birthplace of possibility. Everything that is achieved, created, or discovered begins as a thought. The scientist's breakthrough, the artist's masterpiece, the entrepreneur's innovation, and the leader's strategy all start in the mind. But the mind is a dual-edged instrument. It can create or destroy, uplift or derail, open doors or close them. Without control, the mind becomes a battlefield where fear, doubt, distraction dictate direction. A mind left unchecked allows fleeting emotions and external pressures to determine outcomes. In this state, the future is obscured, opportunities are missed, and potential remains dormant. Control of the mind begins with awareness. Awareness is the ability to observe thoughts without being consumed by them. It is the conscious recognition of mental patterns, emotional triggers, habitual reactions. A person who is unaware allows every passing feeling, memory, or impulse to shape action. The anxious thought dictates decisions, the angered reaction alters behavior, and the memory of past failures restricts forward motion. Awareness creates the pause, the space between thought and action, where choice is possible. When the mind can pause, evaluate, direct thought intentionally, control begins, and the future becomes navigable rather than unpredictable. Discipline is the next step in controlling the mind. Discipline does not suppress thought or feeling. It trains the mind to respond rather than react. It teaches the individual to prioritize purpose over impulse and long-term vision over short-term comfort. Every disciplined thought strengthens neural pathways, conditioning the mind to choose clarity over confusion, focus over distraction, and action over hesitation. A disciplined mind systematically evaluates circumstances, aligns with values, and executes decisions according to strategy rather than emotion. This is how control transforms uncertainty into possibility and makes the future accessible. When the mind is controlled, fear loses its authority. Fear is one of the primary obstacles to accessing the future. It whispers doubt, magnifies risks, and paralyzes action. Fear often disguises itself in a voice that seems familiar, rational, or justified. It tells you to wait, to retreat, to settle for less than what you are capable of achieving. An uncontrolled mind obeys fear, resulting in missed opportunities and stagnant potential. A controlled mind recognizes fear as a signal, not a command. It assesses the truth of the threat, determines whether it is real or imagined, chooses action aligned with purpose rather than retreating into comfort. In this way, the future becomes accessible not because obstacles disappear, because the mind refuses to surrender to them. Control over the mind also enhances clarity. When the mind is scattered by conflicting thoughts, emotions, external influences, the future appears vague and uncertain. Decisions become reactive, priorities are confused, and momentum is lost. When the mind is disciplined and focused, clarity emerges. The individual can see opportunities, recognize patterns, identify the actions required to achieve goals. Clarity allows the mind to distinguish between what matters and what distracts, between temporary setbacks and permanent consequences, between meaningful effort and wasted energy. With clarity, the future is no longer a distant, inaccessible concept. It becomes a set of achievable steps. Authority over thought is another result of a controlled mind. Authority does not mean domination over others. It begins internally. When the mind is mastered, a person is no longer controlled by doubt, emotion, external pressure. They have the power to direct thought, maintain focus, and choose response in every situation. This authority allows the individual to navigate life with intentionality, resist manipulation, and sustain effort despite adversity. Authority in thought translates to power in action, influence in relationships, and effectiveness in pursuing goals. Future becomes accessible because the mind is no longer reactive, it is proactive. Confidence naturally arises from a controlled mind. Confidence is not born from circumstance, luck, or external validation. It emerges from the knowledge that the mind can govern itself, that decisions are deliberate, and that challenges can be faced without being overwhelmed. A confident mind approaches the future with optimism and resilience. It recognizes obstacles as temporary and navigates them strategically. It understands that setbacks are lessons rather than verdicts. When the mind is controlled, confidence allows action without hesitation, reducing the risk of missed opportunities and opening the door to possibilities that would remain inaccessible to the hesitant or uncertain. A controlled mind also enables persistence. The journey toward the future is rarely smooth. Challenges, failures, and delays are inevitable. Uncontrolled minds succumb to discouragement, doubt, and distraction, abandoning effort when obstacles appear. Controlled minds, however, maintain focus, evaluate setbacks objectively, and continue moving forward despite resistance. Persistence is a direct outcome of mental control. Persistence is what transforms opportunity into achievement. The future becomes accessible because the mind is resilient, capable of enduring difficulty while remaining committed to vision and purpose. Control of the mind requires intentionality and practice. It begins with recognizing patterns that are counterproductive, negative self-talk, impulsive reactions, fear-driven decisions, or habitual procrastination. Once identified, these patterns can be replaced with deliberate thought, disciplined focus, and strategic action. Mental control is strengthened through habits such as reflection, meditation, journaling, and goal setting. Each act of conscious control reinforces the mind's capacity to govern itself, creating a feedback loop in which clarity, authority, confidence are reinforced continuously. Importantly, a controlled mind can adapt to change. Life is dynamic, opportunities, challenges, and circumstances evolve constantly. An uncontrolled mind struggles to keep pace, reacting instead of leading, overwhelmed instead of adapting. A controlled mind is flexible, able to reassess, redirect, and respond to new conditions without losing focus on long-term goals. This adaptability ensures that the future remains accessible even in the face of uncertainty or transformation. When the mind is controlled, also cultivates wisdom. Wisdom is not merely knowledge, it is the ability to apply knowledge effectively, to make decisions with insight, to act with foresight. Controlled minds analyze information, evaluate consequences, and choose strategies that align with purpose. Wisdom ensures that opportunities are recognized, risks are managed, and actions are deliberate rather than impulsive. The future becomes accessible because the mind is equipped to navigate complexity with intelligence and discernment. Ultimately, controlling the mind transforms potential into reality. Thoughts become plans, plans become actions, and actions accumulate into outcomes. The future, which may appear distant, uncertain, or inaccessible to the uncontrolled mind, becomes a series of achievable objectives to the disciplined mind. Every decision is informed by purpose, every action guided by clarity, and every challenge approached with authority and confidence. The future is no longer a matter of chance. It is the product of intentional, controlled thought and action. In conclusion, when the mind is controlled, the future is no longer inaccessible or uncertain. Control provides clarity, revealing opportunity and direction. It produces authority, empowering the individual to lead thought and action rather than be led by circumstance or emotion. It fosters confidence, ensuring that decisions are made boldly and persistently in pursuit of goals. Discipline, awareness, persistence, intentionality are the tools of a controlled mind, and mastery of these tools allows the individual to navigate life with purpose and foresight. The future becomes a landscape of possibility, not a maze of confusion. Control of the mind is the key to unlocking that future, making it accessible, achievable, aligned with vision and destiny.